Good evening, everybody. I decided to do a more comfortable evening video. So, my next episode is what if Babe Ruth was never traded? How would it impact the future of not just the New York Yankees, but the Boston Red Sox and even the other teams around the league at the time? So, Babe Ruth, as shocking as it may be, is one of the greatest players of all time, and even he was traded at the beginning of his career. And he was actually a pitcher, which, ironically, most people don't know or don't remember him as one, and that's fine. But he had 20 wins for the Boston Red Sox and 74 for the New York Yankees. So, him being traded, clearly you could almost assume that he's going to have between 65 and 74 wins either way. So, if he stays with the Red Sox, I feel like this ultimately impacts a lot of the future Yankee teams. Not saying they wouldn't win championships, but let's be real, when you have Babe Ruth in your lineup, he's like Shohei Ohtani, and you definitely have to account for him. However, the biggest moment in the history of baseball would not have happened, which is the called shot. And of course, that's even debated to this day. But the called shot that nobody thought would actually happen, happened. And it is still talked about to this day, which shows you the impact. Over 100 years now. And so, would that have happened with the Red Sox? Probably not. Considering they weren't established as the Yankees, they definitely didn't have the firepower. Would they have maybe won a World Series or two extra? Perhaps. But, looking at those lineups in the future, even with Babe Ruth, I don't think the Red Sox stood a chance. Because back then, you didn't have the divisions. The best record, go to the World Series, and the two best records compete. So it wasn't really a lot of fun because obviously, we like underdogs. We love a good Cinderella story now. But that's how it was back then. So the Red Sox would have had a surefire Hall of Famer. They would have had one of the greatest pitchers and hitters of all time. Because I feel like the Red Sox would have kept him as a pitcher, whereas the Yankees eventually shifted him to a full-time hitter. And now, obviously, we all know he was a big boy, so, a lot of power, a lot of responsibility, and, you had to account for him no matter where he was in the lineup. And the other teams involved that would have ultimately been affected and negatively would have obviously been the Yankees. Because the Yankees, while having a powerful lineup throughout the many, many, many decades, would have had to adjust accordingly with no Babe Ruth. You might have had to put 3 or 4 players in that spot to make up the difference of what would have been Babe Ruth. People might have pitched around the guy, trusting like, hey, the person behind him is struggling. Whereas like Babe Ruth, it's like you can't pitch around the guy before him because, well, it's Babe Ruth. He's going to make you pay. And then of course his number wouldn't have been retired as a Yankee. It would have been a Red Sox. And the weird thing about all of this is that rivalry is so heated to this day that it's just funny that those two were involved in this trade, because obviously that was the very early stages of what would become, to this day, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, baseball and overall sports rivalry. Um, just something about it. The fans hate each other. The players obviously respect, but also hate each other, and the cities don't care for one another at all. Um, and that's the way it should be. Personally, if you know, have this, quote unquote hatred for one another, why not try to make, a profit and maximize the potential? But Babe Ruth, um, not being traded, obviously would have helped the Red Sox become probably more of a threat. Maybe not a championship caliber threat consistently like he was with the Yankees, but um, you know the or even potentially the idea that maybe he doesn't re-sign with the Red Sox, or maybe gets traded later on in his career and ends up on the Pirates or the Reds, or who knows. So again, the thought of him not being in pinstripes is very, very, very weird. But at the end of the day, he's one of the most respected men. Definitely the most admired Yankee. Definitely top 5 in that category. And a guy from Baltimore, born, not sure what was going to happen with his family. He made a name for himself and provided the best way he could, and became a household name for everybody. And unfortunately for him, he did battle weight and I believe drinking and smoking, and the ladies, because that can be a challenge. And it just kind of wore him down. And I mean, he probably easily could have played a few more years if he had generally taken care of himself. But it happens. And of course, he was the all-time home run king for a very, very long time. And that itself seemed, at the time, it seemed impossible, because he was doing things during the dead ball era that wasn't supposed to happen. But the idea behind it all is just mind-boggling, because Babe Ruth was a Yankee, but what if he had stayed a Red Sox? I appreciate you guys. I'm trying to do this consistently. It's a little hard with my schedule right now, but we'll get through this together. And like I said, if you want, share the content, like, subscribe, comment, anything. Until next time, Casual Sports Guy. See ya.